This is video file 3 for Caroline Lyons. So I'm just going to briefly go through the window and doors here and the defects with the windows and doors. So I've done a schedule of window and door defects. Now the windows and doors, they're not new, so they're all PVC, but they were, they could be 10 or 20 years old at this stage. They're in reasonably good condition, but there are some problems. So I'll just go through quickly here. Number 1 here, this number 1 here corresponds to number 1 here, just to show you the location down on the drawing. So it's the front door. So the front door, it's binding slightly to its frame. So it's just rubbing off its frame. It does close, but it needs to have, possibly needs to be planed or readjusted. Number 2, this is number 2 over here. This is the living room window. Now, I had difficulty opening 2 of the 3 small sashes. The sashes are the openable, basically the openable windows. I call them sashes. So I think on this window here, there was 3 small ones. Now, 2 of them are difficult to open and close. And I think basically the hinges are going to need replacement. And also 2 of the sash panes have fogged up. So the seal between the double glazed panes has gone and it's fogged up. So I don't have a photograph of it, but so I'm just going to briefly mention here that you can get your windows repaired. By no means do you need to replace the window. You can get them repaired. When commissioning window repairs, it's generally not economical to hire the larger companies who also manufacture the windows. Those companies don't want to take on smaller repair jobs because there's no money in it for them, and they charge relatively highly. So if you're going to get somebody in to do some repairs on the windows and doors, you're best to hire somebody who specializes in doing window and door repairs. They're normally a one-man band. So the fella that I recommend, he's worked for me at least once anyway, and he's done a good job, and those are his details. So he can come out and he can replace the hinges on the sashes, so that they'll open and close better. He can also replace the double glazing panes. He can take out the double glazing panes and replace them with new ones, and so he can effectively recondition it at a fraction of the cost. I mean, a new window could cost 400 or 500, but he would be able to do a lot for for 100 quid, depending on how much needed to be done to the particular window. So if I go back up here to number 3, so the door binds to the frame. This is number 3 here. It's just one of the internal doors. It's binding and it won't close. So the door needs to be rehung and it possibly needs to have the edges planed. Number 4 here, the middle sash. I think there were 3 sashes in this window, and the middle sash won't open because the handle is broken. The handle is broken on it, so it just won't open. So again, you could get this guy that I've recommended here, or any other guy who specializes in repairs, get them to come out and replace the handle. So you don't need to replace the window, just need to replace the handle, and that should repair it. The doors, again, number 6 here is number 5, again, the door is binding slightly to its frame, so it needs to be rehung. And then number 6 and number 7 were in the kitchen. Number 6 and number 7. There were a number of the window handles that were stiff and possibly required replacement. And some of the sashes in here in the window were fogged up. So the double glazing panes need to be replaced. But all of the rest of the windows were fine. So if we move on to the next page, I've also done the same thing on the first floor. So in here, in this bedroom, there was a problem with a couple of the sashes. The the top sash, the hinges were damaged and require replacement because they were very stiff. The sash was very stiff to open, and I couldn't get the window closed fully. It wouldn't close to form a tight seal, so there'll be a constant draft. So that needs to be fixed. So he'll probably replace the hinges at least anyway to try and get that right. And the bottom sash is the same. It won't form an airtight seal either. So both of these windows are not in great condition. Both of the sashes are not in great condition. But again, it can be repaired just by replacing the hinges. Number 9 here, this door is binding to the frame, and number 10, it was also binding slightly to the frame. Just they're small, simple jobs. And over here, number 11, there's one of the panes here in the sashes is fogged up, and that will need to be replaced. So other than that, the rest, not that there's not that many other windows, but the rest of them were fine. Now, in the living room, this is the living room here. This is the front living room. There's a timber floor, and the timber floor is expanding, and it's expanded so much that there's actually there's no more room for it to expand under the skirting board here, and it started to belly up in locations. So it's bellied up here. Also on the other side of the room, it's slightly bellied up. So this can be repaired really. What you need to do is take off the skirting board, and basically the timbers need to be trimmed back so that you leave a gap between the wall and the floor of about 10 mil to allow for expansion. So basically the timber is basically taking, during different times of the year, it's taking up moisture, expanding, and that's why it's causing this. But you need to just take off the skirting board, trim back the timbers, and then put the skirting board back on to cover the gap, and that'll resolve that problem. So that's the same room. So you can see the door is binding slightly to the floor because it's raised up slightly, but it's only very slightly binding. Now, I did notice on a number of the rooms on the ground floor, close to the floor itself, you're getting a lot of, or not a lot of, but a little bit of black mold growth. Now it's very minor. But it's there. It's black mold. It's not caused from rising damp. There is no rising damp. When I put the moisture meter on the wall, everything is coming up as dry. And basically, what's causing this is, a slight amount of condensation on the walls. So when you have the heat on, the warm, moist air in the room, it hits the cold wall, condenses, and after a while you get a little bit of mold growth. It can be washed off. It'll kind of come back, I suppose, after a few years. It's not a major concern, I suppose, but I would kind of wash it off and remove it. Now, the only way to kind of permanently stop it from coming back is to insulate the walls better. So you could fill the cavity, or you could dry line the walls, and that would prevent it. Or you could also improve the ventilation in the rooms by having a vent in the wall to improve air circulation. That would help reduce it. It'll also make the building a little colder. I noticed that none of the rooms have ventilation. So now the other thing I'd noticed, when you walk around, you'll notice on the ground floor and you look up at the ceiling, there's a number of cracks in the ceiling in all of the rooms, and basically that's happened because the floor is slightly under-designed. Like I say, this house was originally built as a dormer house, so these timbers on the first floor, they were not designed for the loading that they're currently getting from the space upstairs being used. So the timber joists, when I measured the timber joists, they're 150 millimeter deep floor joists. Now, in general, nowadays, when you're putting in a first floor that's going to be a livable space, the joists are generally 225 deep. So your joists are only 150 millimeter. This is a common problem when you have a dormer house that's been converted to when you have a single story dwelling, when it's been converted to a dormer. Contractors typically don't replace the timber because it's a very difficult job to do. They want to kind of just keep what they have. And so basically the timbers are slightly under-designed, and there's going to be a little bit more movement in these timbers, and hence you're getting the ceiling cracking. Many of the ceiling cracks have been filled, but you can still see them. It's not a structural concern, really. I mean, I'm not worried that that the floor is going to collapse. It's really just a serviceability problem and an aesthetic problem, in that you might continue to get cracking in the ceiling, but it's just an aesthetic problem that you could just kind of fill over them. That's the way I normally recommend dealing with it. And you might notice when you're upstairs, the floor might not seem as solid as some floors. There might be a little bit of movement or vibration in the floor. Now, to be honest, there's not a lot. When I go upstairs and I check the amount of vibration, there's not a lot. I've seen much worse, so I didn't really even notice vibration. But again, the ceiling cracks are because the floor is slightly under-designed. So I'm going to stop this video here, and I will continue on with video number 4.